Old powers waken, shadows stir. An age of wonder and terror will soon be upon us. An age for gods and heroes.
The glass candles are burning, and you're listening to the Obsidian Nights podcast. Hello, my sweet summer children. I'm back with another episode of Obsidian Nights, and today we will be doing a Game of Thrones Sansa 2. And the guest I was supposed to have on for Sansa 2, I couldn't reach them, so I have my tried and true podcast Obsidian Knight, Justin Thomas from Top Shelf Fandom.
Glad to hear that I'm always within an arm's reach, right?
Yeah.
And I'm
I'm glad.
But me and you we differ on Sansa, but no, this is an excellent chapter in a worldview, in a macro and a micro. Yeah.
This is the perfect chapter for you because you are a Sansa apologist. You are you like Sansa, so this is a good chapter to have you on because the people that listen to me, they don't get to hear good things about Sansa very much. So this is good.
Yeah. I wouldn't say apologist. This would not be the chapter I picked because there's a lot more for us to go over.
No, I think in the future, we can do a Sansa in defense of Sansa. Like, now is your opportunity to lock that in. If you want to do a Sansa in defense of Sansa, we can do it, but you're going to have to fight me.
No, yeah, I know. I just want to make sure that we sign a contract for the rest of our other business dealings to make sure you still work with me. The fight is not my worry, my lady. But no. Here's the thing. You don't back down. It's not your digs, right? Like, it's not something you're interested in doing. So if you don't want to, you don't want to. I don't think at all that you feel that you couldn't present yourself a case, but that's not what this is about. I'll get it out of the way. Sansa is a necessary story. I think Sansa is a story that is very meta in the sense of what is Sansa's issue at the very beginning of this story. She has been raised by, let's just call it for what it is. Ned and Catelyn did not do a great job as far as, enlightening Sansa into what the world really is. And we have two things in life that dictate the way in which we perceive the world. Story, which are fairy tales, like Tolkien-esque stories that she's read and she embraces, and then this laissez-faire attitude that Catelyn and Ned foolishly, and I would say, ignorantly and in a very dangerous manner, installed in her. So Sansa is going into this story and she's being thrown to the whoops. But I would say that the best thing about this in a meta sense, just let me get it out, is that all these fairy tales and all these things that everybody talks about that Sansa is so enthralled with and she's so ignorant for believing, guess what? That's kind of the point of Sansa's story, is to empower people through that so they see a story about that, because we don't cite life for life, we cite story for life. And it's very important to have her story alongside Arya's story. They complement each other.
But they came from the same fucking castle, the same coochie.
First daughter and second daughter.
They came from the same coochie. They came from the same castle. They came from the same ball sack. Like, these are the same people. And all of the siblings, minus Jon Snow, so far as we know, all have the same parents and they came from the same castle. And Sansa is just so much different than them. And I know, like, you can be raised in a house and be different from your siblings, but usually your core values are like the same.
And duty is her core value, and she does a lot of the same things. Yes, absolutely. First off, Arya is pretty much, if I had to do an analogy, she is somebody that is going to eventually not have to travel by boat because planes will be invented. So the whole time that, they're in a carriage learning about boats, she's just staring out the window, having her second daughter lifestyle, which allows her to go and be adventurous and look at the broader world, where Sansa's paying attention to shit so she can sail Arya's ass to America, where they can invent airplanes and things can actually happen because she has duty. And I hear a lot of talk about, like, people acting out of emotion, especially Catelyn, right? Everybody, that's her folly. She's so emotional. Name me times that Sansa acts out of emotion. Really never. She just takes it, and she has that internal strength.
She always acts. She acts out of emotions a lot. The whole thing where she told her dad's plans to Cersei was out of emotion, that she wanted to say bye to Joffrey and she wanted to be in King's Landing with Joffrey. She didn't think about she did think about what kind of effect it would have. She knew that the queen can make him stay. The queen can command him to stay. But it was her emotion of wanting to be with Joffrey.
Well, but being with Joffrey, I mean, this is going to turn into a whole different. In all fairness, this is what this comes down to: is that Sansa is a character in which we despise for the reasons in which these are constructs of the time. So I'm not going to do the whole a victim of the time, or a result of the times in which they live in. But we can't ignore the system in which is being depicted to us. Number one, because that's true. One of the actual reasons for Sansa's character is to depict the internal actual workings of a feudalistic landscape. So there are multiple reasons to write story threads. This is one of them. There's the meta aspect, as I spoke of having a very empowering story, because you want to talk about people buying in the bullshit. And I'm not going to even play like the gender card here. I'm just going to play like a pure ignorance card. Like, people are ignorant. They think they can be a prince or a princess. That's actually true. Sansa's story is far more empowering in a meta sense, meaning for the people that read it, because they see, yeah, why would you? Because the anger in which you feel, Gray, and you know how much I love you and respect you. You know what I mean? Like, you have a far better handle on the lore of this than I do or will ever have. And I respect the hell out of that. But what you feel right now is the point of Sansa. And that is good writing.
That's what I was going to get. I was going to say, she's a very well-written character for her purpose in the story. That doesn't mean I like her.
No, you don't have to.
The fact that I dislike her proves that she's a well-written character.
Oh, then why are we fighting? Oh shit. Okay. All right.
I'm not saying that she's a bad character. I'm saying that her character is a bad fucking person, and frustrates the fuck out of me.
Yeah, like, I wouldn't say bad. That's for another time. I wouldn't say frustrates me, but that's fair. I just see a lot of people, and I hate that. I think you had a tweet earlier that said creating the most toxic, and I love the fandom, and I think there can always be good that comes out of it, right? But come on, like, people will be like, if you like Sansa, then you can pretty much go fuck a goat or blah blah. I mean, they say crazy shit.
No, a part of it is that the fandom is really toxic when it comes to Sansa and Daenerys.
Yeah.
So there's this thing in the fandom, this unspoken thing where Daenerys is always attacked by using Sansa, and Sansa is always attacked by using Daenerys. Like, if you can't say anything bad about Daenerys without comparing her to Sansa, or you can't say anything bad about Sansa without comparing her to Daenerys, then like, it's pointless. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And I just want
to you're comparing two completely different characters in two completely different situations that I just can't relate the two.
Oh, I love that you said that, and thank you for saying that, and hopefully your voice will empower that. And I want to just do my one quote, and we can get into it. You are just speaking just straight out of George's heart here. This is from him. None of us have a omniscient viewpoint. We're all alone in the universe. We hear what we can hear. We're very limited. If a plane crashes behind you, I would see it, but you wouldn't. That's the way we perceive the world. And I want to put my readers in the head of my characters. Isolated. Right? Threads. Right. This is what you're talking about. So yeah, by all means, carry on. Yeah. And this is a fantastic chapter that gives us this wonderful point of view from Sansa. A lot of, even though I know it's a POV and it sounds redundant, but Sansa is so much in her head because of that internal struggle, right? Like, the actual exposition that you get from her, like verbally or overtly, but however you want to phrase it, you know what I mean? Like, it is very little. It's a lot of her internalizing things in kind of, being taught about what a knight really is by the Hound, Loras, and then you have Dantos down the line. There's like 3 knights in her life that really, like, I see through the thread that really inspire what she is or lead to what she becomes.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to Sansa, when it comes to this chapter, there's a lot that we could talk about, but I wanted to say, like, before we get too far into the chapter, because that's what we're about to do, that one of my pet peeves when it comes to Sansa is that a lot of people that champion Sansa say that is the strongest type of woman.
Mhm.
So I got into a Twitter argument before with a Sansa stan. She was like, well, Sansa is the strongest type of woman. She represents feminism. And I'm like, she does not represent me. She does not represent me. I don't think that you have to take all of the most feminine aspect, and I don't want to say weak aspects, but the most feminine aspects, like being quiet and being
Subservient.
docile, being all of that, submissive and all of that shit, and say that that is the strongest type of woman, or that all women should relate to this, because all women aren't like that. And that's why these characters in the books are different. And that's why different people relate to different characters. Like, to me, I'm more of a, I don't have fucking dragons. Like, look, if I had fucking dragons, shit would be going down. But that's why I relate to Daenerys, because her strength is very outward. And I feel like mine is too. I'm not going to be submissive. I'm not going to be a docile woman. I'm not going to be the handmaiden tale type bitch. I'm not going to be that ever. So I cannot relate to her. And I also think that she's a mean girl. Like, she's a Gretchen, a Regina George type of girl, especially to her sister. And I can't fuck with that.
Yeah, well, and I get that complaint to an extent here, and this is where the argument comes into play, because that's where I say I like to I like to set gender aside, because I feel like that is really the folly of this argument, is that people will say she is the embodiment of feminism. She is, she is actually realistic. All of them are fake. I just went over this in a diatribe in a live stream, because I needed to put out content on my own channel like a few days ago. And I just got done for the second time reading The Science of Storytelling and Story Genius. And all this is actually, like, these are all studies done by neuroscientists and people that are professionals in the cognitive function of our actual brains and what we experience. When you read Jane Eyre, you aren't thinking about Jane. You are Jane Eyre. When you read about Dany, you are Dany. When you read about Sansa, you are. Stories influence our life just far more than we give them credit for, because we don't feel any type of strain. It is a leisure activity to us. The same way in which a berry that is poisonous tastes bad to us, and a steak tastes good to us. Right. Not non-vegans, obviously, but you get what I mean. Like, it's because the storytelling animal is us, and it's advantageous for us to learn from story. And we don't understand or really realize how much we actually cite story for situations in our real life. And I think it's very important to lay this down, that Sansa is not subservient in the sense of she's just weak, but she is sitting back, and she, at this point, in all fairness, she is the last Stark, because she doesn't expect anything out of Jon, of course, because of her upbringing. You have to remember that her upbringing is what it is. She is the last person with the name. Arya is dead, or who knows where, and she has to survive. So she is sitting back, she's surviving, but also I would argue that she is doing some maneuvering behind the scenes, and she's internalizing it. And the one big catalyst for me, and I'll just leave it here, is the string of bodies that enable Arya to be empowered are you start with Euron and just move your way up. How many men die for Arya to become this magical warrior? And how many men die for Sansa takes it, and yes, and then when she's able to, she positions herself. You're a chess player. You got to respect that.
Sansa, after A Feast for Crows, Sansa,
she's dirty. She's dirty. She's dirty. You're starting to, like, I respect the fuck out of her. See, that's so weird, because that's when I don't like her, and then you like her.
That's when I like her.
Yeah,
I like
crazy.
her. I cannot fucking stand, like, I can't stand when she's all swooning over Joffrey and Florian the Fool and all this shit. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. And I know that she doesn't have a choice. And I know that she's surviving. And I know that it's a different type of strength to be able to go through that shit. But I'm just saying, don't say that she is the embodiment of feminism.
No,
don't
yeah,
say that.
Absolutely.
Like,
but yeah, both ways are bad. I think that when you are a purist in any sense, I've said this a million times, you are a fool. You need to understand that there are two sides to every story. So a feminist will go about, mostly in a traditional sense of, well, they have to almost display what would be depicted as masculine behaviors, right? Like Lyanna Mormont is like one of the worst ones, like in the show. Like, she's just like, I can hold the spear as well as anybody. Like, okay.
No, but that's what I'm saying. But that's what I'm saying. Brienne could be the embodiment of feminism.
No, she is. They all are. But
Daenerys could be the embodiment of it. They all are collectively. So to say that one is more feminine than the other, it just
incorrect.
Pisses me off.
Because the strongest woman isn't the woman that does men things, because that's a disservice to women. Because if what makes a strong woman is what makes them like a man, you are going under the assumption that men are stronger. And I don't mean physically, because physical strength is one attribute, and it's not a great one, because you tell the drones that are killing all these, who knows how many, push-ups these guys can do that get blown up by something from Radio Shack. You ask them what that strength did for them. Intelligence is everything. That is one aspect of it all. So it is what it is. I think George presents us, and I always say, why does everybody pick a hill to die on? That George sets like two, Palatine hills, like in Rome, right? For us to like see the opposite of, like Arya and Sansa, Brienne and Marjorie, right? Like all these things that we should be taking notes from. But then we got people on Twitter that are like, fuck you, you're a piece of shit. Like George is like, what the, like that is like not what this is about.
Sansa rode to the hands tourney with Septa Mordane and Jane Poole in a litter with curtains of yellow silk so fine she could see right through them. They turned the whole world gold. Beyond the city walls, 100 pavilions had been raised beside the river, and the common folk came out in thousands to watch the games. The splendor of it all took Sansa's breath away. The splendor of it all took Sansa's breath away. They watched the heroes of 100 songs ride forth, each more fabulous than the last. The 7 knights of the Kingsguard took the field, all but Jaime Lannister in scaled armor the color of milk, their cloaks as white as fresh fallen snow. Sir Jaime wore the white cloak as well, but beneath it he was shining gold from head to foot, with the lion's head helm and a gold sword. Mm-hmm. Sir Gregor Clegane, the mountain that rides, thundered past them like an avalanche. So Sansa's just like recalling all the, like, she's just mesmerized by all the knights.
Mm-hmm. And there's so much metaphor here that I just want to touch on, because like even in Seen Through the Silk, right? Like it's almost like Seen Through the Veil. Mm-hmm. Like the silk lens is rose, these rosy glasses per se. But,
and she's seeing gold, Lannisters.
Yeah, that's what I love that about Jaime. Wears the white cloak as well, but underneath, he's something else, right? Mm-hmm. And in this way, he's depicted, as the lion, the Lannister, the wealth and all that. But this is all of this, like, it's just shining light on this facade. And there is I think a little bit of intelligence that a lot of people wouldn't like to admit. I'm not talking about you, but like a lot of people wouldn't like to admit. I think she's observant of this. That, like, these knights that she's read so many stories, because as you just brilliantly quoted, of what Knights of 1,000 stories or tales, whatever.
Yeah.
This is what happens in real life.
Even in Sansa 1. Oh, sorry.
No, yeah, no, I'm just, and you're about to get to real life where blood starts spurting out fastly, but then slowly. Like, I mean, yeah.
But even in Sansa 1, like a big part of that chapter was how she had learned who was who and what was what. Like she knew who Barristan Selmy was, and she knew who Renly was without having to be told who they were. And she was proud that she knew those things.
And those are important things for a lady of her station to know at this time to make a difference. You know what I mean? We have to understand that is not a submissive role for her. That is an empowered role at this time.
Right.
We don't have to say, I mean, because, hey, we all could be like moonwalking in 1,000 years or whatever on Mars, eating at a Pizza Hut / Taco Bell, because things will probably still be about the same. But yeah, you know what I mean? But like at the same time, like, let's not be ignorant. Like it is what it is. Like it's written during this time period. And of course, we all know, but Captain Hindsight has no place in this podcast, at least in my opinion, or you can boot me off.
Oh, God. So anyway, she watches the jousting, and the mountain rides against Sir Hugh of the Vale, and the mountain sticks his lance right up in his neck and kills him, and he falls like right in front of Sansa, like 10 feet in front of Sansa, and like Jane Poole is crying. Septa Mordane has to take her away, but Sansa is actually not even fazed by it, kind of.
Well, she keeps her composure, and this is something that's an ongoing thread because she has been taught that is what a lady does. and this will aid her. And this is also not a great emotional thing. I'm sure any therapist would tell you, but yeah,
it says, but Sansa sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching with a strange fascination. She had never seen a man die before. She ought to be crying too, she thought, but the tears would not come.
Because she did not know this man. And this is an allegorical take on war, right? For these lords, because how many people that never met Ned, Robb, right? John,
yeah, I mean, she says that. She's like, he's some stranger from the Vale of Arryn whose name she had forgotten as soon as she heard it. And now the world would forget his name too, Sansa realized. There would be no songs sung for him. That was sad. Yeah. But I feel like that is a hint at dark Sansa. Like, I feel like Vale Sansa is dark.
She is. No, she is. But it's because what the world, because I guess the argument that we would have to culminate or come to the conclusion at is,
we don't have to argue about it.
No. But I'm saying like the argument would be, is she better, or do we need her to maintain the virtue? Because she obviously has not been educated. We both can agree on that in a sense that's proper, or a sense that's like applicable to the real world. Like, she has walked in a fool. Like, again, like I asked you before we started recording, how much rope do you have in your purse? You're like, none. I'm like, well, if I throw you down a hole, and I'm like, dummy, didn't have any rope. It's like, why the hell would I carry? Nobody told Sansa to bring any rope. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. So I think, no, but you're right, because I'm with you. Like, she gets dark, but it's a dark world.
Yeah. So in the end of all of the jousting, it comes down to 4 people: the Hound, the Mountain, Jaime Lannister, and Sir Loras Tyrell. So I will say that I think those are the 4 best swordsmen in the entire Westeros. Even though this is the joust, I think hands down the Kingslayer is the best swordsman in this story when he has 2 hands. I think the Hound is badass. I think Sir Gregor is badass. And I think Loras Tyrell is badass. Loras Tyrell is just very young.
Yeah, I agree with that. If I have to like do like MMA math, I would say that it would come down to Jaime and Loras. And Jaime would take because of his experience, but Loras is the only other one that isn't just relying on pure like brawn, meaning strength, like a puncher's chance. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like he has I think that's a very accurate and impressive breakdown right there, because I agree with you. I think that Jaime is the most technical fighter, and he's the one that's able to, regardless of strength, have the technique. It's not just a puncher's chance. And I think that Loras, you're right. Yeah, he's younger. And I also did you notice how every time after Loras wins, how he like randomly just goes out and passes out? Like, he is just like the embodiment of the fairy tale, right?
Chivalry. That's why Sansa is so drawn to him.
Oh, absolutely. I am too. I'm like, what a great guy. He just, he's whooping ass. I can appreciate that. And then he's being chivalrous. I'm like, hey, dude, you're pretty cool. You know what I mean? It is what it is. I like his style.
And then we have Peter Baelish, who is up in this mix.
Dislike his style, just to be clear.
Sweet child, this is Lord Peter Baelish of the King's Small Council. And the first thing he says to Sansa, your mother was my queen of beauty once.
Oh, so weird. Like, so weird. Ew.
And I think it's interesting, the obsession that Littlefinger has with Sansa. George,
she's more Tully.
Yeah. George, she has all the Tully features. George talked about it, how the show, Littlefinger had gave Sansa to Ramsay. George was like, that his Littlefinger would never give Sansa away.
He's like, my Littlefinger is a pedophile. So no, like just straight up. I mean, he is. Like, he is.
He said that he thinks of her as his daughter. Littlefinger thinks of Sansa as his daughter with Catelyn, or like as his, something, or as Catelyn herself.
Yeah, which is a problem, and that's where the pedophile, I'll take it out if you want, but that's kind of where that derives from. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you're like kind of like Catelyn. You got all those Tully features, none of those Stark features that, cut me emotionally and physically. Such a weird. Everybody is being presented to her. And now there is a lot of realism. I like that they go into depth, and I understand why the show did not, right? With this, I like how there's a melee here. I like how like Thoros Samir is being like, jested at, right? They're kind of like giggling about him because he's kind of silly, but then they hear about his great deeds. I like how Beric Dondarrion, I think you've talked about this in episodes past, like he is such a big deal, like he is such a hot shot. Like in the books, like he's such a hot shot. Like, not that he's some chump in the show, but like they really, like, it's like a bunch of peacocks in this chapter just walking about, like, you know, like showing off their feathers, and you can tell who's prominent, who's not, and she's taking note of their fighting styles. This is a really fun chapter. It's full of metaphor though. Like everything is just like you could spend hours breaking it down.
So they have dinner, right? Like it turns into night. They have like this dinner party thing. And Joffrey sits beside Sansa. And Sansa's like, oh my God, my prince, my precious prince. And she's like not putting any blame on Joffrey for what happened to Lady.
She puts it on Cersei
and Arya.
And in fairness, she is 12 years old. Her station in life is to be a queen.
She knows he lied. She knows he's a liar. She knows he's a man without a shred of honor.
Well, you show me this 12-year-old, any boy or girl with as much virtue and knowledge and wisdom as everybody claims to be, and I'll give you $1 million. But yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's a fault in her logic, but she's also a 12-year-old girl that is being shoved into a situation in which it's not really an option for her not to be here. Is it? Did she choose it? Did she like enter a raffle to be? I mean,
no, but she squanders her chance to leave away. But that's another chapter. She could not hate Joffrey tonight. He was too beautiful to hate. He wore a deep blue doublet studded with double row of golden lion's head, and around his brow a slim coronet made of gold and sapphires. His hair was as bright as the metal. Sansa looked at him and trembled, afraid that he might ignore her, or worse, turn hateful again and send her weeping from the table. Instead, Joffrey smiled and kissed her hand, handsome and gallant as any prince in the songs, and said, Sir Loras has a keen eye for beauty, sweet lady.
Mm-hmm.
So she has a good night with Joffrey.
And Joffrey also, there is some sympathetic, or at least I'd say empathetic aspects of Joffrey here, that he is obviously, he is fainting, right? Like he gives the septum some wine. Yeah. He is now, like, because let's not act like he's like just so overtly evil to her. He's not. He really isn't. Like at this point, I don't fucking like Joffrey.
He killed her dog. He killed her dog. If somebody told a lie to the point that Yuki gets killed, I'm throwing hands. I'm coming for the throat.
Oh, and I was ready for this. If you've ever seen Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Dennis Reynolds once in one of the episodes where they have like Frank is in, like he's with these terrorists, like whatever, Danny DeVito, and Dennis is trying to like do the 24-hour news cycle, and a dog comes by and say, oh, I thought we were, and it's just the very fact, and I can sympathize with this because I'm an animal lover myself, but if you mess with animals, you are fucked. So like the very fact that Lady is killed, I strongly believe that if you took that out of this story, which I don't think you should, because I think the story is still beneficial, trust me, the hate mostly derives from she let something that was really out of her hands happen to Lady, but she also justifies it in her head. Let me tell you about things you can justify in your head. I think everybody knows deep down inside we can justify a lot. And she doesn't want to think the guy that she is supposed to marry is responsible. And she puts that on the Cersei, who is telling her some hard truths and talking about hard decisions. I'm not justifying it, but that animal death, trust me, it gets me too. And yes, you're right. It is so hard. If you say you don't like a dog, they're like, I am not subscribing to Top Shelf. Like I will lose 1,000 subs and I've only got like 4. So don't. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I can't afford it. And I like dogs. I love dogs. I love all animals. But yeah, you can't get past that. Go ahead. So, I knew you were going to go to it, though, and I knew Yuki was going to come into play. I was ready for the I'm not going to do it, but yeah. No, I get it. You're right. I love animals.
So, Robert Baratheon makes a roaring announcement that he's going to fight tomorrow. If I say that I will fight tomorrow, I will fight. I am king. That's what he says. But little does he know. So Robert wants to fight in the melee, but little does he know, like
That
they
lasts 3 to 4
they
hours.
want him to
by the
fight.
way.
They want him to fight in the melee because they want him to die.
Yeah, it lasts 3 to 4 hours. Melee's like that's why they always use the tilt, meaning like the joust, as the actual like depiction of like who wins and who loses, because it's fairly like straight up, right? You're at each other's lance, and there's a little bit of description within here, which I think they do a pretty good job of, like French like chivalric tourneys, because that's really where most of this one happened. Blah blah blah. Robert's like, okay, you both like pointed, but one did it cleaner. Like it comes down to crap like that. The melee, it's like 4 hours long of just bashing each other. Though. It's insane.
So eventually it gets late and Sansa, wants to go. It's time for her to go back. And Joffrey's like, do you need an escort? And then basically Joffrey sends the Hound to take her back. And I really like the Hound later.
We all do. The Hound is hard truth. The Hound is breaking the idea of Loras. Loras is the depiction of the fantasy story in which she's been told. The Hound is the drunken, burnt, abrupt, which I love dogs, dog that tells her how things are. Could he do it in a better way? Yes, he could. But is he looking to be a teacher, or is he kind of just like spiteful in general? He's not a knight. He just like, he barks orders at her. He barks like truth at her, and she needs to hear it. He's one of her three. There are 3 tutors of Sansa. Like I said, there is Loras, there is the Hound, and then there's Dantos. And I think that then you have Dark Sansa, Sansa,
and the Hound kind of like, tells Sansa like, I may need to kill my brother tomorrow. Like, just unloads all his bullshit on her, and she's like, huh?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah, that's a good point. That's what I was trying. Like, is he really trying to teach her? Is he just like, like you just said, unloading his bullshit?
Right.
Well, he mocks her too for Joffrey.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, did you think Joffrey was going to take you?
Yeah, and he also says, some septa trained you well. You're like one of those birds from the Summer Isles, aren't you? A pretty little talking bird, repeating all the pretty little words they taught you to recite. And Sansa's like, that's unkind.
Yeah. Because she's not because she thinks in her head, though, there is a moment again, and I know that it sounds like a little like redundant or even silly for me to say that most of her POV is in her head, but more so because there's less dialogue. Actually, it's a lot of internal monologue, and she thinks that she should be kind to the Hound because he's a nut, but he reminds her, he's like, I'm no knight. You know what I mean? Like she's trying to like really like fit that mold that in which she's been casted in. And
he basically tells her like Gregor killed Sir Hugh of the Vale on purpose. Like he knew his gorget wasn't fastened right. Like he knew he was going to kill him.
Gregor's lance goes where he means it to go. And also, didn't Lady Arryn not allow any of the Vale Knights? Is it because is he technically, how was Hugh able to compete? I thought that Lysa didn't permit this.
I have no idea.
Well, he's a rapscallion. That's why he died. He got what was coming to him. Good for him. Yeah, but he says, oh, you think that was an accident? You think that, he's chivalric? You think he's noble? No. Like, so he's just drunkenly spitting, and he's like 80 feet tall. So like, this is a 12-year-old little girl. So like in hindsight, this isn't great either. Like, this isn't a good education, but like you have Ned and Catelyn at Winterfell letting her read these fairy tales, and then you've got the Hound screaming at her. I don't know.
Yeah. And I feel like the Hound kind of just like unloading on Sansa is partly because he's drunk as shit. Like he's telling her like how his brother burned his face and the night and the toy and all that shit. Like he's telling her that whole story, and I don't know.
All jokes aside, I think it's departure from your familiar tutelage, tutored.
I mean, I think it's an attempt to humanize the Hound because he's not really.
But he is attracted to her too, which plays the George's dark side, because this plays into this. This is part of his motivation, as we're led to believe, that he takes an interest. Why is he unloading this into Sansa? He's like, things aren't like you think they are, little bird, blah, 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 right? Like, that's odd as well.
And so after he tells Sansa the story, Sansa's like, he was no true knight. And the Hound just fucking busts out laughing. It's like, no, little bird, he was no true knight.
Yeah.
Like, but that should that metaphorically, him telling Sansa that at this tourney of nights where she's so focused on all the nights, should tell her that, yeah, most of these nights aren't true nights. There are no true nights.
But also, we just discredited the shit out of him, Gray. The drunken gentleman that has an odd interest in this young lady just spewed a whole lot of, yes, truth as we know it now in hindsight. But what? She should be dispelled because of his word alone? This man?
No, she shouldn't be. She shouldn't be dispelled. But those are things that, I mean, as the story goes on, like the Hound is a big part of Sansa's story.
No, he definitely is. But in hindsight, but at this point, she shouldn't be like, "Oh, you're so right, Mr. Drunken Giant." That's
no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying metaphorically, though. I think that's why George has it there.
Oh, yeah. Like that's why I say he's part of the 3 tutor system. You know, Loras, the Hound, then Dantos, the Fool. I think that's her. That's her lesson. I think people accredit Littlefinger more than they should. I think it should be those 3.
Yeah. So when they get back, she's like, "Thank you, my lord." The Hound caught her by the arm and leaned close. "The things I told you tonight," he said, his voice sounding even rougher than usual. "If you ever tell Joffrey, your sister, your father, any of them." "I won't," Sansa whispered. "I promise." "It was not enough. If you ever tell anyone," he finished, "I'll kill you."
Mm-hmm. Reasonable guy. Reasonable stuff. That's what I'm saying. Like
and that's how the chapter ends.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. Like, like it's just like, oh, thank you, kind. Like, I mean, I can't tell you how many walks home I've had from fancy gentlemen that have just said the same damn thing. It's just a fantastic situation. Yeah, the guy's obviously out of his mind. So that's the paradox in which Sansa is faced with. Like, is this chaos versus chaos, right? Like, it's like, oh, what, you think this is all good? No. Well, let me be this crazy, huge, man that is going to threaten to kill you also and be all drunk and tell you this. So Sansa does not have she is always off her footing. And I think that Sansa, it definitely, by the time, that she turns into Dark Sansa, take it as you will, is after her tutelage from these nights. And I think this Hand of the Tourney is a perfect example. And I think they could have done a little more in the show as far as showing the different types of culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all that. This is a beautiful chapter to read. This is the part of Obsidian Nights that I love so much, because going back, and this is the first time that I actually did my lazy listen instead of my read, and I forgot how RIP, how he says Pitar.
Pitire.
Yeah, I forgot about that, but
and Brian.
Yes, yeah, but it shows the inception of it and all that. But it is a beautiful chapter, and it paints such a vibrant picture, and this shows George's ability to write, his cadence, meaning the rhythm of his writing. And I think this is this is almost like a macro view of the world other than just Sansa's, more than anything, in my opinion. That's why I would say it wouldn't be the best one to use for Sansa's,
No, if you're gonna do a defense of Sansa, you have to just not use one singular chapter. You have to have her a Feast for Crows stuff. You have to have her a Storm of Swords stuff. You have to have that kind of stuff. The
result of everything that's happened. Even the one before this that I did a re-listen to, gave me a lot more insight. And, that again comes from her paying attention in the carriage and Arya looking aside. That's where I get my metaphor. I'm like, oh, that sounds fun now. But in real life, it's listen, somebody needs to pay attention here, because it's oh, we don't know how to get to the moon in the 1800s, and somebody's paying attention, and one person's I'll be there anyways. She almost has. I'd like to say that Sansa does have her faceless man moment, much like Arya does, but she just has it in a different way. She really does, because Arya leaves a pile of dead bodies of people that die for her survival, and Sansa internalizes a lot of that pain. And I think that both service each other. And I don't want to hear that Sansa is an embodiment of femininity because she's not, all strong or wielding a sword, because women definitely can do that. But also, I don't want to hear that strength is the only thing that makes you strong. Oh, what, you can do what a man does? That means you're strong. No, that's a disservice to women. Trust me, I know how clever you guys are. I hate how clever you guys are. You're way too clever. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many instances where it's like we need to appreciate these micro threads and separate them and take a lesson from them. And please stop making all of these hills in which George gives us one for you to die on and slaughter others on. Because that's what happens in this fandom. It's like, oh, if you don't like this person, you can burn in hell. It's like, my God, what happened here?
I be feeling like that about Daenerys, though. So, and about Jaime, like I'll throw these hands for Jaime Lannister, but that is Sansa too. I think we covered everything we needed to cover.
Yeah, no, yeah, she's perfect, or she knows she's perfect. Your kids could die. No, yeah, it is. Yeah, obviously I have the benefit of editing this. No, but yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy Sansa as a POV that is more of a meta POV. That's the last thing I'll say. Again, it is more of a benefit when we hear that she's consumed by these fairy tales. Well, this is a story for everybody to read, no matter what gender, and be like, guess what? Shit gets rough. Maybe you want to bring some rope with you next time so you can climb out of that hole. So yeah, I love this as always. Even if I'm not editing it, it's an honor to be on, and it's fantastic because I get to enjoy these chapters again. And I highly recommend that everybody else does.
I appreciate you for coming. I appreciate you for editing, being my editor for Obsidian Nights. And anybody that's watching, if you want to get on a podcast episode of Obsidian Nights, all you have to do is go on Twitter and contact @Nims Shadow. I will leave it in the description box. And she's doing my schedule. So she will give you a chapter. She will give you a date and time to record. And we will record together. And it'll be on Obsidian Nights podcast. And I will see you guys next week.